Here tonight. Thank you for the turnout. We're excited about beginning this week of our bicentennial celebration here at Washington Baptist Church. And of course, all of you, well, especially those who are members of Washington, are well familiar with our schedule for next week. But for those who might be visiting, next Sunday morning, we have Sunday school at 9:45, and our worship service, our celebration service for our bicentennial, will be at 10:45 a.m. And then afterwards we'll have lunch together, and then sometime after lunch we're going to have a book signing of the book that I wrote called In Mountain Shadows, which is the 200-year history of Washington Baptist Church. So let me just say we're just delighted that you've come to join us tonight, and I want to say thank you to Mr. Dean Campbell. Many of you know Dean, and I've known him for a number of years. Wanda's going to introduce him, I guess officially. Where are you, Wanda? There you are. Okay, in just a moment. But I want to just say on a personal level, I've known Dean Campbell for a number of years, and he has been a teacher and a mentor to me, and I have appreciated his friendship. By the way, Dean does a Dark Corner tour. You're still doing those, aren't you, Dean? And this would be a wonderful Christmas gift for your family or for your friends. See Dean after the service tonight, and he'll give you details on that. He'll take you to some places that you didn't even know existed in this part of the country. I was with a group one time, and he took us, we forded a creek, and it was a county road, right, Dean? A Greenville County road that fords a creek. And I bet you didn't even know there was one of those in this county, but there is. So there are a lot of great things to discover about our upper part of Greenville County. And Dean is the man. He is the expert. And we are delighted and honored and pleased to have him tonight. And we're pleased to have you too. In all of our celebration, we are careful to give God the glory. For 200 years, there are not many institutions that survive 200 years. The Washington Baptist Church is one of them. And we give glory to God for all that He has done. Now, we started this journey of planning for our 200-year celebration about a year and a half ago. Last January, a year ago January. And we've had a committee that has been working so hard to pull all this together. And I know we're going to recognize them next Sunday, but I'm going to ask the members of the 200-year celebration committee to stand, if you would, please. Let's give them a hand. We appreciate you so much. Let's bow together for an opening prayer, shall we? Father, we thank you for Washington Baptist Church and the rich and glorious history that you have given us, and for the bright future that awaits us. For the people, men and women, down through the years who've led this church, who have been a blessing to this church, and for the ones yet born who will come and occupy positions of leadership in this church and lead this church should Jesus tarry in the days ahead. Lord, we pray now that you'll bless this time, that it will be a time of information. But Lord, most of all, it'll be a time of inspiration as we hear how you have woven a tapestry for 200 years in this church. You've brought things together. You've brought people together. You've brought events together. And you've blessed us in so many ways. To God be the glory, great things He has done. We love you and honor you. In Jesus' name, amen. Carla's going to come and lead us in a hymn. Carla?
Good evening. Take your hymnals and turn to hymn number 594, Faith of Our Fathers. Let's stand together and sing all three verses.
help.
Okay, can everybody hear
No,
me?
let me see. Let me see it.
Can everybody hear me now? I too want to say thank you so much for coming tonight. It has been really such an interesting and exciting and learning experience to chair this committee. We have had great people on this committee who have given their time and many countless hours to plan things. And one reason we thought this would be so good for you all tonight is because we need to know more about our history. We need to know more about what was going on in upper North Greenville County when we were born in 1819. So I have heard both of these men speak. Drew is a historian. Dean is truly a historian. And we, the committee, about over a year ago, we went and toured the Dark Corner with Dean. Joe Price drove the bus. Dean and Drew led the tour. It was the most meaningful experience to me. So I challenge you, try to get on a tour. You will love it. You may think you know a lot about this area. You do not. You'll learn new things. I want to now take time to tell you about Dean. And it's a long introduction. He thinks it is not too long because he has done so much, and I want you to know what he has done. So here I go. He is known as the Squire of Dark Corner because of what he does and what it has meant to him to even be a student of it. There is a young man of some 45 years who shares with this writer not only a knowledge of much of this area's history and heritage, but a deep, abiding love for the mountains and people of the Dark Corner. In fact, he was among the first to reveal, through published words and photography, the other side of the Dark Corner, offsetting many years of unfavorable media coverage. This effort earned him the affectionate title, the Squire of Dark Corner, which was first coined by Jim McAllister, and you all who read the Greenville News remember him. He was a columnist for the Greenville News in Greenville, South Carolina. Dean has not only known and been an integral part of Dark Corner, his family had been in the Gowansville area since John Landrum Campbell came from Virginia in 1832 to homestead on Tugelo Road. But he has known and has been an active participant in the outside world as well. He has been an associate editor for a national trade magazine in New York City. He was on the copy desk of the ill-fated Western edition of the New York Times in Los Angeles and has been a producer, director, and research director for a Western advertising agency handling the London Bridge's relocation to America and the building of the world's tallest fountain, both in Arizona. He is a graduate of Furman University. He holds a professional and advertising degree from UCLA. He has conducted seminars and instructed adult education classes in small business marketing and advertising at Greenville Tech. He conducts a 10-week starting and operating your own small business seminar at Tech each quarter and is one of 6 advisors for the Supervisory Development Training Program for the college. Since returning to the Dark Corner in 1974, he has contributed both articles and photographs to the Sandlapper magazine, Living in South Carolina, and the South Carolina magazine, in addition to centennial and bicentennial newspaper editions. He recently published The Campbell Family, The Gowansville Connection, and assisted in the preparation of this volume with technical publishing advice, illustrations, and 10 of the volume's photographs. He is also a thespian, an actor. He has appeared in the Greenville Little Theater, and I have had the honor to see him before, and maybe many of you have too. But he appeared with Joanne Woodward in the bicentennial production of The Glass Menagerie in Greenville. He continues to both direct and act with Tryon, North Carolina Little Theater and makes guest appearances on stage with the Anderson Community Theater and the State Theater of North Carolina in Flat Rock. It is significant that Dean chose to return to the Dark Corner some 25 years prior to retirement age, attesting to his love for this land and these people. Having already participated in a lifetime of experience, Dean shows no sign of diminishing efforts. Rather, he anticipates the next 45 years with inevitable changes the 21st century will bring to our beloved Dark Corner. Dean is, in his own words, committed to maintaining the pristine beauty which has been part of the heart and soul of these families for generations. Amen to that. And currently, he's in the middle of writing the bicentennial history for Gowansville First Baptist Church. And also, he wanted me to let you know that he currently teaches at Walford, Clemson, and Furman on the Dark Corner. So, ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in welcoming Dean Campbell and Drew for our evening's presentation.
Thank you.
I trust that I'm on. Can you hear me? Now that you're sufficiently bored, we'll start. We thought for celebrating your 200th anniversary, it would be good to have an evening where we talk about what happened to the place, how it came about, and then what happened to us spiritually. So I have the first part. The increasing encroachment of Cherokee lands by the South Carolina colonists caused the tribe to seek lands further west and resulted in some hostilities between the Cherokee and the Creek Indians for lands that they had traditionally shared. But in 1755, the Cherokee signed a treaty with the English in which they ceded enormous amounts of land to the colony, which included the present-day counties of Spartanburg, Lawrence, Abbeville, Edgefield, Richland, Newberry, Union, Chester, Fairfield, and York, the bulk of the central part of the state and northern. The treaty also established an official Indian boundary line. That's the present-day Greenville-Spartanburg County line, from the blockhouse site on the two Carolinas all the way due south to a point on the Enoree River below Greer. That's why Greer is in two counties. Line Street in Greer is the old boundary line. In all lands west of that line were the lower nation of the Cherokee Indians. In 1756, England declared war with France. And in the same year, there was a council held at New Orleans between the Cherokee and the French, where the French promised that if the Cherokee supported them during this war, that they would provide the means, such as arms and other goods, to encourage the Cherokee to make war against the English. The Cherokee allied with the French in 1760. As a result, Governor Henry Littleton of South Carolina Colony marched against the Cherokees and attacked their villages in their own territory, which resulted in another treaty that demanded that the Cherokee kill or imprison any or all French who should come into Cherokee territory, so long as England was at war with the French. Well, most Cherokees continued to fight the English. Renegade bands who rode with renegade Tories, people who turned against their own white people, attacked settlers on the eastern side of the boundary line. A series of 12 fortifications called the Strong Indian Line was set up by the colony to give the local settlers places to go for protection when renegades were in the area. These fortifications were small forts, fortified homes, or fortified trading posts. 3 of these fortifications were located on or near the Blackstock Road and included the Blockhouse near Tryon, Gowan's Fort near Gowansville, and Fort Prince down in the Duncan area. There was also an Earl's Fort just into North Carolina above Landrum, and a Woods Fort here in the Greer area. In July of 1769, a colonial judicial district known as 96th District was set up at the most western of the original districts within the province of South Carolina. This included Abbeville, McCormick, Edgefield, Saluda, Greenwood, Lawrence, Union, and Spartanburg, with portions of Cherokee and Union counties thrown in. And just prior to the American Revolution, several other non-enforceable treaties were signed. Finally, in 1775, the Treaty of Sycamore Shoals was signed that was the breaking point for most of the Cherokees. They joined the side of the British militia as a way of making war on the ever-encroaching settlers, and were given guns and ammunition by the British, and even offered bounties for American scalps. Captain Thomas Howard, at 16 years of age, was commander of local militiamen who were known as Rangers. Through the help of Skyuka, an Indian boy about his same age that he had befriended, Skyuka led them through a little-known pass so that North and South Carolina Rangers could get over the mountains quicker and surprise the renegade Cherokees. They did, and killed several of the Indian party in what is known now as the Battle of Round Mountain. While not a resounding victory, the renegades were forced to bury their dead before they returned to Cherokee territory. Then on May 20th, 1777, the Cherokee of the Carolinas gave up and signed a final treaty at DeWitt's Corner, which ceded all of the remaining land west of the Indian boundary line to the newly established state of South Carolina, and many left the Cherokee Nation land thereafter. New American settlers began moving into the former Cherokee territory right away. Revolutionary War soldiers who were not paid during the war, but after the war they were issued pieces of paper called idents. Beginning in 1784, they began to exchange those idents for land grants in the Glassy Mountain area. The Cherokee territory was used by the state to create Greenville County in 1786 and Pendleton County 3 years later. Now, Pendleton included the present-day Pickens, Oconee, and Anderson counties. In the same year, parts of Spartanburg, Union, Chester, and York counties were designated as Pinckney District. So we're suddenly getting a lot of districts up here. But by 1800, both Pinckney and Pendleton districts were disbanded, and counties within each were so designated purely as counties. Today, the upstate, or upcountry, as many of us prefer, consists of the 10 westernmost counties of the state in the commerce-rich I-85 corridor. It is the fastest-growing region of South Carolina and is the geographical center of the Charlotte-Atlanta mega region. And long before the coming of modern-day interstate highways and major U.S. routes, this upcountry area had numerous trails and roads which have had major connections to the entire state and region. When the Cherokee roamed the Blue Ridge Mountains of the southern end of the extensive range of the Appalachian chain, the Upper Warriors Trail, which is present-day Cherokee Scenic Highway 11, had a major crossing with the Tougaloo Trail in the present-day Gownsville area. The Upper Warriors Trail was the major route over which the Cherokee traveled to fight the Catawba tribe in present-day Gaffney to Charlotte area, while the Tougaloo Road, so named because its name meant two abreast, was the widest trail from the Tougaloo River on the Georgia line all the way to Virginia. The Rutherford Road, named for Colonel Griffith Rutherford, who led successful excursions against the Cherokee in North Carolina and Tennessee, and who also participated in the Revolutionary War Battle of Kings Mountain, was the major route from Greenville, South Carolina to Rutherford, North Carolina. From Landrum area, it traveled through Gownsville on SC-14 to Berry's Mill, then right on Berry's Mill Road to South Carolina 101 at O'Neill, turning south to Milford Church Road, then right for a short distance before turning left on McElhaney Road, crossing over 290 and becoming Stallings Road through Pebble Creek and to Greenville. The Old State Road, which was a toll road, from the Saluda Gap on the North Carolina line through the state to Charleston, passed over Poinset's Bridge, built in 1820, following along the Saluda Gap Road to its intersection with present-day 253, and passed through Tigerville and Sandy Flats on its southward route. Saluda Gap Road proceeded from the Poinsett Bridge along what is now Callahan Mountain Road, crossed over the Upper Warriors Trail, Highway 11, and followed the upper reaches of South Carolina 101 to O'Neill, then southeast on present-day Gap Creek Road, passing near Washington Baptist Church, to Duncan in Spartanburg County. Two roads over which the drovers brought gaggles of geese, herds of pigs, and other groups of animals down from North Carolina to the Columbia and Charleston markets were essential routes. From Saluda, the Buncombe Turnpike brought drovers through Travelers Rest and Greenville, while the Blackstock Road was the major route from Howard Gap to Fair Forest and Spartanburg. Until textile mills began operating in Greenville, Taylors, Greer, Lyman, and Spartanburg areas in the 1870s to 1890s, the upper portion of the former Indian Territory was never part of the plantation economy of the state. It was united in a barter society with western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, which was dependent upon the legal and illegal distillation of moonshine. In fact, moonshine was extremely important to this area for three major reasons: medicinal, cultural, and economic. There were no patent medicines on the frontier. Moonshine mixed with numerous natural herbs and spices was necessary for maintaining good health. As a part of Appalachian culture, it was sinful to get drunk, but not to drink water of life responsibly. But the entire area's economy was dependent on its distillation. It was virtually the only way for families to make cash money. Property taxes had to be paid immediately and could only be paid with cash. There was no way to barter taxes. Since the diversification of the area's economy following the death of textiles, Greenville and Spartanburg County areas have led the state in economic growth, with daily commuting to thousands and thousands of good-paying jobs, filling major roadways with passenger vehicles, and a seemingly endless caravan of major trucking operators moving raw materials and manufactured goods to all areas of the nation and the world. To succinctly illustrate the transformation from a barter society in the area to a textile-led economy to one that's based on high technology, let me give you two incidents which happened just 40 years apart concerning the Gallonsville area, just 10 miles up the road. And I'll just tell them. When giving a presentation on the dark corner to some of the first retirees over at Rolling Green Village on Garlington Road in Greenville, as I normally do, I make the statement that I remember very well being a young boy of 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that, and remembering of seeing professional men come to my father's home late afternoon or early evening to buy his chartered whiskey for medicinal purposes. Now, chartered whiskey is white lightning that is put into burned out barrels and kegs and buried underground for a length of time to age it. It changes its color and it makes it smoother to the taste, but also easier to mix herbs and spices. When the presentation was over, I always have people to come up afterwards to thank me or ask questions. The third person in line was a very attractive, white-haired elderly lady with a cane with 4 legs, who said to me immediately that she was 93 and that she could attest to the fact that my father made some excellent whiskey for medicinal purposes. She said, "I've had many a spring tonic made with your father's good chartered whiskey." And then she said, as she patted my arm, "You see, my husband was Judge C.C. White." So that's when I patted her arm and smiled, and I said, "Yes, Mrs. White, and it was your husband who put my father on probation for making it." The second incident happened just recently. I was standing in my driveway on Highway 11, which is 1 mile west of the intersection of 11 and 14. And a car came down Highway 11 from US 25 area, and the fellow in the car pulled into my driveway. He rolled down his window and he said, "I understand you have a challenging golf course off Highway 11 in this area." "Sure do," I said. "It's called Links of Tryon. But more than that, if you take a 12 air mile radius all the way around my driveway here, you have 9 courses. And if you want to expand it out to a 15 air mile radius, you can add 3 more courses." "You gotta be kidding," he said. I assured him I was not. That is the difference.
Thank you, Dean. My task tonight is not to talk about whiskey, but to take the more spiritual course of talking about what I used to call, when I did this presentation in some museums and places around the area, the light of the dark corner. I first did this at the Upcountry History Museum back in 2009. Since, I've done it at the Greer Museum, and I've done it at several other places, and some of you have already heard this, so just act like this is the first time, okay? There's a common myth that's been perpetrated throughout American history that the early American frontier was always a stronghold of piety and morality, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. Early travelers to far-reaching western settlements in North Carolina, Tennessee, and the upcountry of South Carolina often lamented the deplorable moral and spiritual conditions that they found. For example, one of our early pastors, Reverend Samuel Gibson, who came to this country from England and came up through Charleston to the upcountry, when he and his wife and her sister first came to Greenville County, after they saw what was going on around here, they just about turned around and went back to Charleston because it was so bad. Bishop Francis Asbury, who frequented the hills, the mountains of the frontier, wrote many times in his journals about the drunkenness, immorality, and biblical ignorance that prevailed in the backwater settlements of the mountains. This began to change with a movement known as the Second Great Awakening, dating roughly from 1790 to 1840. There were 2 great awakenings in early American history. The first was a New England phenomenon, and it took place between 1730 and 1760 under the leadership of Jonathan Edwards. Well, the Second Great Awakening was a revival movement that swept the frontier. Many of the Scots-Irish settlers who moved down the Great Wagon Road from Pennsylvania into Virginia and into the Carolinas brought with them some of this religious fervor that was spreading like wildfire through Virginia and Kentucky. During these years, more people were moving into northern Greenville and Spartanburg counties, as Dean has already indicated. And as the population grew, churches began to spring up here and there. Some of the earliest congregations were Baptist, and they included Reedy River Baptist Church, which was founded in 1778, mind you, just 2 years after the founding of our country. Fort Shoals Baptist Church followed in 1780. Then the first Dark Corner churches arrived on the scene. The head of Tiger Church, now known as Tiger Baptist Church, which was an arm or a mission of Reedy River, first appears on record in 1793. And if you go up 414, Highway 414 to North Greenville, you'll see it on the left there. Brushy Creek in Taylors was organized in 1794. These 4 churches became the mother churches of most Greenville County Baptist churches, and they were very prolific. They started churches all over the county, which answers the question that most Yankees ask when they first moved to Greenville. Why are there so many Baptist churches here? Well, the answer is, of course, because these 4 original churches were faithful to the call of Christ and organized churches all over the area. On July 16, 1809, a group of believers began meeting for worship at a crossroads 1 mile west of the village of Gowansville. It wasn't until May 5, 1820, that they were officially constituted as Crossroads Baptist Church, an arm or a mission of the head of Tiger Church. And this congregation continued to be known as Crossroads until 1873, when the name was changed to Gowansville Baptist Church, and later First Baptist Church of Gowansville. And this church has become an icon of the Dark Corner, and there's a lot of history, as Dean has already talked about, at Gowansville Church to go along with its picture postcard appearance up there on the hill. Beautiful church. One of the very earliest congregations in the Dark Corner, and certainly the oldest Methodist as far as we can determine, is Liberty Methodist Church, which was established in 1832. It is one of the oldest Methodist congregations in the entire upstate, and may have even been, according to an anecdotal tradition that I heard, Dean, which may not be true at all, but I thought it was interesting, that it could very well, that church could have very well been a stop on the Underground Railroad. And I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but it makes for a good story. In 1833, the head of Tiger Baptist Church again established another arm that would come to be known as Glassy Mountain Baptist Church. And this church was officially constituted on May 22nd, 1835. Now, Washington founded much earlier than that in 1819 as an arm of Brushy Creek Baptist Church. And many believe also Reedy River played a major role in the founding of Washington. Now, these are just a few of the early churches that appeared on the scene in the late 18th and 19th centuries. And I think it's a testimony to the faith and to the commitment of the people of these churches that all of these congregations that I have just talked about survive to this very day. And they're strong churches. I want to talk a little bit about some of the institutions that have played such an important role in the moral and spiritual development of the Dark Corner. And there are many of these. I just want to mention a couple. One of them happens to be my alma mater, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And you say, well, what in the world would the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky have to do with the northern part of Greenville County? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Some of you may know that the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary was founded in 1859 in Greenville, South Carolina. And The original faculty, the seminary was founded by James Pettigrew Boyce, who was a Princeton graduate who came from the wealthiest family in South Carolina, the Low Country. And the original faculty consisted of these professors: John A. Broadus, Basil Manley Jr., William Williams, and Crawford Toy. Now, if you go to Greenville, over there close to the, Bon Secours Wellness Arena, and you go across, is that East North Street? Over there behind the old Episcopal Church, you'll see streets with these names: Broadus, Manley, Williams, Toy. And that was the area where the original Southern Baptist Theological Seminary was established. Well, unfortunately, for those of us who had to travel to Louisville, Kentucky to go to school, the seminary relocated to Louisville in 1870-something. But the reason I think that this institution played a role in the history and the spiritual development of this area is that the history of the Tiger Baptist Association tells us that in 1860 the seminary faculty was added to the ministerial force of the association, and they were dispersed regularly to the churches for preaching and instruction. Tiger, Gowensville, Glassy Mountain were all part of the Tiger River Association. And so we can assume, therefore, that these professors were regular preachers in the pulpits of these churches. And some of you have heard my theory on this before, but if you've been around this area, particularly this part of the county, for some time, for 2 or 3 generations, there were men with the first names Broadus. Does anyone have a Broadus in their family? Okay. Manley, and Toy. I had never heard of a man with the first name Toy until I moved to Greenville, South Carolina. Crawford Toy was a very popular young preacher. He preached all over the area. Well loved, well liked. But then Crawford Toy went to Germany and studied under some of the higher critics in Germany and became a full-blown liberal. When he came back to the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Greenville, John A. Broadus and Boyce escorted him to the bus station, to the train station. The train station. And Crawford Toy took a journey and ended his career as a professor at Harvard. One of the results of Crawford Toy's turn to liberalism was that his girlfriend dumped him. Her name was Lottie Moon. Yeah. Now, another institution that left its mark on the dark corner was actually an institution that was located in the dark corner. I'm talking about the Earl Seminary, the Earl Academy, which stood for some 30 years in Gowensville, founded by Dr. Thomas John Earl in 1858. Thomas John Earl was one of our pastors at Washington, by the way. This popular school taught the basic courses of education with a special emphasis on the Bible, which should come as no surprise considering that Dr. Earl was also the pastor of Gowensville Baptist Church for 33 years. Students came from all over the Southeast to attend this academy. In 1869, official records indicated that Earl had a total of 55 pupils under his tutelage. Shortly after his death in 1889, the school closed. Now, if you go up Highway 14, a mile past Gallinsville Baptist Church on the right, you'll see a beautiful two-story red brick house back off the road. That was the Earl home, Earlsdale. And it was also not only the home of Thomas John Earl, but it was also the dormitory for the students who came to study at the Earl Academy. Well, they stayed upstairs, and Reverend Earl, very strict Baptist preacher, made sure that a partition was placed down the hall so the girls couldn't get to the boys. Right? He forgot that the windows opened out onto a roof. When the Earl Seminary closed in 1889, basically there was the great influence of Earl's educational institution was gone. And there were many who feared that because the Earl Academy closed, that the young people in this region would of course, not have any further opportunities for education. And so the North Greenville Association, I believe it was in 1889 or 1890, came up with a resolution that something be done about this. And so the North Greenville Academy, which is now North Greenville University, was founded as a result of the closing of the Earl Seminary. So that gives you an idea about how great an influence that this academy had on the area. And again, Thomas John Earl, we had the privilege of having him as one of our pastors at Washington. And this must have been back in the 1840s, 1850s. Bruce Durham wasn't even born at this time, so we give Bruce a hard time. No discussion of religion in the dark corner would be possible without mentioning some of the great pastors who pastored in this area. And one of the greatest of all was Reverend John Gill Landrum. And yes, the town is named after him. He's another man who had 2 or 3 generations of baby boys named after him. Anybody ever heard of someone with the first name of Landrum? Absolutely. He was born in western Tennessee in 1810. His family had gone to Tennessee from Union County, South Carolina, and he returned to Union as a teenage boy to live with some of his family. He was ordained in 1831 and had a distinguished ministry in Spartanburg County and in Greenville County. He pastored several churches in this area. His first tenure was a pastor at Gallinsville Baptist Church, and his first tenure was 4 years, and his second tenure was 2 years. And during his time at Gallinsville, according to the church's history written by Thomas John Earl, quote, some of the best people in the country were added to the church. He pastored many churches in the area, was one of the founders of the Tiger River Baptist Association, and led one of the greatest revivals in the 1835-36 that has ever been seen in this area at Brushy Creek Baptist Church. Landrum died in Landrum, South Carolina, January 19, 1882. During his ministry, it is reported that he baptized over 5,000 converts. And that fact was mentioned in his funeral address delivered by Dr. J.C. Furman. By the way, when Landrum died in Landrum, and I've read, there's a great biography that I found, long out of print, by Dr. H.P. Griffith, who was the founder of Limestone College. It was a biography on Landrum. And he said that when Landrum died, the officials of the Spartanburg-Asheville Railroad arranged for a train to be brought from Asheville to Landrum to carry the Landrum family to Spartanburg, where Landrum was buried at Mount Zion Baptist Church. A great man. Another preacher. Many of you have heard of him, Reverend Alex D. Bowers. He was called by J. Dean Crane in his book A Mountain Boy's Life Story, a hero in the dark corner for the gospel's sake. Bowers was a Confederate veteran, largely self-educated, and he was ordained by Glassy Mountain Baptist Church in 1861. During his long ministry, he organized several churches, including many in the heart of the dark corner, including Brother Jerry Ebenezer Welcome Baptist Church that I once had the privilege of pastoring, Highland Baptist Church, Oak Grove Baptist Church. In all, he served 23 churches during his time. He was a temperance preacher. After the Civil War, many of the veterans of the Civil War came back to their homes, to their farms, severely damaged. Some of them physically, most of them emotionally, mentally. We talk about stress? Yeah, PTSD. There. We talk about PTSD and the effect that it has on veterans of all wars. And we just can't imagine the horrors of the Civil War. Can't imagine what those men went through. And when they came home, of course, there were no counselors to talk to. They were expected to carry on their lives. And many of them turned to the bottle. And they drank a lot of that dark corner, a lot of those dark corner spirits, and I might add, not for medicinal purposes. Bowers saw what alcohol was doing to the people of this area, and he preached strong sermons against alcohol and against the manufacture of moonshine, which didn't make him exactly one of the most popular people around. In fact, he was on the 10 most wanted list among the bootleggers and the moonshiners. One day he was preaching. I don't know where he was preaching, Dean. I think it might have been Highland, wherever he was preaching. And the windows were open, and this is a true story. Barrels of guns come through the windows of the church. They're going to assassinate Alex D. Bowers because of the effect and the influence that he's having on their industry. And Bowers stopped his sermon and he said something to the effect, "Boys, I've got a sermon here to preach, and I'm going to preach it. You can kill me when I finish preaching." And of course, these guys were so humiliated by the great preacher's words, the guns were withdrawn and they decided to try it another day. They never did, though. Another one of my favorite stories about Alex Bowers involves a group of Mormon missionaries who were camping up around Highland. And as soon as Bowers heard about these Mormon missionaries camped up there, he sent word to them. He said, "If you all aren't out of here by sundown, I'm going to set some boys on you." Well, evidently the Mormon missionaries inquired about the boys and they decided to break camp, and they were gone, never to be heard of again. He died in 1909, and both he and his wife are buried at Highland Baptist Church. And after his death, North Greenville Baptist Association, in their annual meeting, honored Bowers with a dedicatory page in their book of minutes. Another one I want to mention before we close tonight is a great man of God. Many of you have heard of him because some of he lived within our generation. His name was J. Dean Crane. And Dean Crane was another one of the ministers that pastored Washington Baptist Church. He was here briefly, but the records show that the church grew mightily while Crane was here. J. Dean Crane was a native of the Ebenezer Welcome section. And he had a brother named Buford and another named Shade. And I'm going to be careful talking about the Cranes because there are a lot of Crane kin folks here tonight, Dean. And I don't want any gun barrels coming through the windows, I can tell you that. But this was a great family, but early on, the Crane family did make moonshine. For medicinal purposes only, I'm sure. Dean Crane was wondrously and miraculously saved as a young man. Buford followed. I think they were baptized the same day at Ebenezer Welcome. And immediately, Dean felt the call to the ministry, and he was a very effective minister. Very effective. He was well loved, admired, respected. Most of his ministry was spent at Pendleton Street Baptist Church in Greenville. He was a first vice president of the Southern Baptist Convention. As a matter of fact, he was instrumental in the 1925 resolution that introduced the cooperative program to Southern Baptist life. He also was president of the South Carolina Baptist Convention. There are a lot of stories about Dean and Buford. Dean was more serious. Buford was kind of a fun-loving fellow. And you've all heard the story, whether it's true or not, I don't know, about Dean preaching somewhere one Sunday morning, and Buford was out in the congregation, and Dean stopped preaching, and he said, "Buford, wake that fellow up that's sitting beside you." And Buford said, "You put him to sleep, you wake him up." Now that may be an apocryphal story, I don't know. But they tell it for the truth, and there is one true story about one South Carolina Baptist Convention where there was some issue that had been hotly contested and a lot of back and forth. And I think the meeting was at Pendleton Street. And so Dean stopped everything. He might have been president that year. And he said, "We're going to stop. We're going to pause for a few minutes. And there are going to be refreshments served in our fellowship hall." And Buford piped up and said, "Will there be hot dogs?" And Dean said, "No, they're all up here." Dean died of a massive heart attack on the morning of January 10th, 1955. After his death, his widow received a letter from President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And he told her in that letter that when he had been in Columbia for a public appearance on the steps of the Capitol building, Dr. Crane led in prayer. And he said, "I was so impressed by the depth of his prayer and the sincerity of his heart that I had to ask who this man was. And I was told that he was Dr. J. Dean Crane, and he was a well-admired pastor in the state of South Carolina." Dean Crane. And he, again, was one of our ministers here at Washington Baptist Church. Finally, Dr. Howard. You knew him.
Knew Dean Crane, too.
Yeah, you knew Dean Crane?
Yeah, Dean died my senior year at Furman.
Is that right? Were you named after him?
No.
Okay. Yeah, Dean Crane, as a matter of fact, was instrumental. He was a member of the Board of Trustees at Furman for years.
Yes.
And he was instrumental in moving the campus from downtown to its present
And if
location.
we have time, I'll tell you the favorite story that we as students had about it.
You tell us now. While we're talking about Dean Crane.
My senior year at Furman was 1955, and he was responsible for Furman being on the new campus where they are now. He was on the board for 30-something years. But we had a favorite story as students that we told on him. He was quite strict in the way he wanted people to react spiritually. But there was one thing that he would not forgive. He didn't believe in dancing. And so one day he's walking around the campus. He happened to be on the men's campus. And he's walking around Gear Hall, which is so old it has shrubs that are tall as trees. And he hears some noise behind the shrubbery. And so he goes in and he parts the branches of the shrubbery. And sure enough, there is a co-ed and a Furman boy doing some serious petting. And he says, "Oh, excuse me, I thought you were dancing."
That might be an apocryphal story too, I don't know. But that's a good one. Dr. Jim Howard was a descendant of Captain Thomas Howard, direct descendant of Captain Thomas Howard, and he was a minister, member of Highland Baptist Church, he and his wife Ruth, and I knew them as well. When I was pastor at Ebenezer Welcome, I had the opportunity to spend time with Dr. Howard, and he really ignited my interest in the study of the Dark Corner because he wrote the original history, I suppose, or the most popular history of the Dark Corner up to that point, entitled Dark Corner Heritage. And Dean, as Wanda has already said, played a major role in the publication of that book. And are you reprinting that?
It's not going to be reprinted probably anytime soon. The nephews have the copyright. They allowed the Greater Gownsville Association to print 2 printings of it, reprintings, as a fundraiser.
Okay.
But they are not I asked them just last year, and they are not planning to. I wish they would.
Yeah, it's a great book. If you can get a hold of a copy, Dark Corner Heritage. I'm going to close my little part here tonight. I wish we had 2 hours because there's so much that we could say. And this is something that some of you have heard me do before, but perhaps this is new to many of you. Music has always played an integral part in the lives of the people of the Dark Corner. Music was in their blood and in the very fabric of their DNA. They brought it from the Highlands of Scotland, the glens of Northern Ireland, and the moors and villages of England. My story begins on New Year's Day, 1773. Anglican cleric John Newton has written a poem to go along with his annual New Year's sermon. He entitles the poem Faith's Review and Expectation. It really tells the story of the amazing grace of God, and John Newton is a man who knows something about God's grace. And you're familiar with the story of John Newton. He was at one time a slave trader, and he was saved and became a Christian and became an Anglican cleric. Well, after he wrote this poem for his New Year's Day sermon, he published it, and someone set it to music without much success. Faith's Review and Expectation remained largely unsung and unknown for several years. This is where William Walker comes in, born in Union County in 1809. Walker, from an early age, just couldn't stop singing. And he soon became known as Singing Billy Walker, and he became a pioneer in the development of shape note singing, fa sol la method. By the way, next Sunday morning, a group from our church is going to sing a song as they would have sung it in 1835 here in the old fa sol la method. You'll enjoy it. He soon moved to the Gownsville area and bought some land. In fact, he gave Gownsville Baptist Church 5 acres of land where their church is now located. William Walker was an enterprising soul. He started publishing songbooks. He would travel throughout the region, holding singing schools in the churches, and then sell his book to anyone who would be interested. Walker's shining moment came in 1835 with the publication of a hymnal called Southern Harmony. It's one of the first and most important hymnals in American history. And if you had an original copy of Southern Harmony, you could retire to Tahiti. They're priceless. Some of you are familiar with the Diary of Washington Taylor. Washington Taylor lived from 1809 until 1884, and he resided behind Gilreath Mill on Rutherford Road. He led music in several churches in the area. And in his December 19th, 1835 journal entry, he says, "Saturday I went to Walker's singing at Brushy Creek. Walker's books come." And Walker's book that he's talking about is Southern Harmony. In that book, Newton's hymn, Faith's Review and Expectation, appeared, but Walker gave it a new title and a new tune. The title was Amazing Grace, and the tune was an old ditty from the British Isles called New Britain. And the rest, as they say, is history. William Walker, when he signed the deed for the land that he gave to Gowensville Baptist Church, there were two William Walkers in the area, and he signed the deed, William Walker, ASH, which stood for Author of Southern Harmony. And so William Walker, who probably led a singing school at Washington at some time, and who gave the land for the church at Gowensville, was the one who was responsible for popularizing the most beloved hymn of all time. And if he hadn't done it, none of us probably would have ever heard of, let alone sung, Amazing Grace. And that's just a little bit about our spiritual heritage in this area. Wanda, let me turn it back over to you.
Preacher, I was here Sunday. Dean Crane told Buford, said, you wake him up, you put
So it was here. Thank you.
All right, everybody. If you enjoyed that as much as I did, please let them know that. If this doesn't make you want to take a tour of the Dark Corner and Upper Greenville, North Greenville County, and also to buy Drew's book, which we're going to premiere next week, then something is wrong with you, because this is the most fabulous work that I have read about our history. And Dean Crane is unbelievable. Dean Campbell is unbelievable. I just love what you had to say. Thank you so much. All right, questions from the floor. We got microphones. Anybody have a question? Clay. We got a mic coming, Clay. I mean, you're very important.
Thank you. How did Washington acquire the name of Washington Baptist Church?
Clay, I'm glad you asked that question, because I address it in the book. You'll have to buy a copy now.
That was a setup question.
Yeah, that was a setup. Thank you. No, actually, there's a lot of mystery surrounding that. Of course, let's see. There was a famous guy named Washington, wasn't there? I think his name was George, and he was the father of our country. But here's the question: was the church named directly after George Washington? Or was it because Dean talked about the districts, the various districts? At one time, this was the Washington district.
Right.
And so it could very well be that it was a geographical relationship instead of directly after George. So, but we don't know that.
That's pretty good.
Thank you, Clay Vance. Here comes
There was a young lieutenant over there that fought in that battle named Bob Washington. And during that period of time, after the war was over, they came up here to Edwards Lake in a convoy and fought a skirmish with the Indians up there. They had killed some of the white people up there and scalped them. And Bob Washington was in that group of men that went up there. That's the way I understand it. And they settled down the unrest up there. And later they were influential of building the fort up here at Gownsville.
Thank you, Vance. Anyone else with a question?
This is more a statement. While I have been laid up, I've been doing a little bit of digging with family history. And my fourth great-grandfather was Reverend Samuel Gibson.
Yes.
So imagine my surprise when you mentioned him.
Samuel Gibson, and there are so many descendants of Samuel Gibson, but because he had a large family. But Samuel Gibson pastored Washington. He and his wife are buried at Milford.
Yes,
And-
above ground, by the way.
Yeah, above ground there in a crypt. And was he at Gownsville?
Yes. When William Walker gave the 5 acres to Crossroads Baptist Church and they built their first building, John Gill Landrum was in his short history with us as minister when the first building was built, not the one that's there now. But when he left, we had Samuel Edwards there as our pastor for 3 years. Last year, I was invited to Greenville to the Poinsett Club. They had the descendants of Samuel Edwards and his wife to celebrate the 200th anniversary of their being in America. And Al Thomas, who used to be a client of mine with my company that I worked for in Greenville, an agency, he said, "Dean, I want you to come and be the closing speaker." I didn't know quite what he meant by that, but I found out later because the big thing of the day was a professor from the Columbia campus of South Carolina who is working with a big group of them to produce a new Edwards genealogy book, by the way. And so it took so long to finish his report that I had 10 minutes allotted to me. May I tell them what? Anyway, in a company of genealogists, I said to them, when I finished my remarks about Reverend Edwards, I said, "By the way, those of you who are committed to genealogy, may I give you a warning? It can take over your life, and I can prove you to it." And so I said I was working in Greenville in an agency with a young lady who was researching her Hutcherson family. Well, they didn't believe in always recording deeds and things like this, so she found it difficulty, and she searched for years, and she always had one generation that she could never find. She knew where they came from up to that generation. She knew where they came down to her own father from that point. And it was just, she was like this all the time. One day, at age 53, with evidently nothing wrong with him physically, her father died of a massive heart attack. The following day, she and her mother went to the mortuary and made arrangements. And on the way home, the mother looks over, and Anne is driving, and she is gripping the steering wheel. Her face is all flushed, and her mother can tell that she is extremely angry. And she turns to her and she says, "Anne, dear, what's wrong?" She wheels the car to the side of the road, cuts off the motor, looks her mother straight in the eye, and says, "Do you know what? Now Daddy knows the answer."
Melinda, let me say something about Samuel Gibson. Samuel and his wife and her sister was a Rowe, and they came to Charleston. And the first Sunday they were there, they went to the First Baptist Church of Charleston. There was a man trying to raise a tune, heist a tune, as they used to say, and he couldn't get it. Samuel and his wife and sister-in-law went up there and started the tune and sang it beautifully. And the people of the First Baptist Church of Charleston begged them to stay. In fact, he was a blacksmith, and they offered him a job to repair the church bell, which he did. But then they came to the upcountry. And Samuel was so overworked because there were so few preachers up here and a good many churches that there were a lot of times he didn't feel like getting out of bed on Sunday to go preach, because you'd have to ride a horse for miles to get somewhere. And his wife would tell him, would say to him, "Come on, Sammy, get up and go. A good pulpit sweat will do you good." He got up and went.
Any more questions? Vance, did you have something else?
I'd like to add something else to what I said. A lot of people don't know that Brenton Price was Samuel Gibson's descendant.
Yeah, that's right.
And, he was buried in that crypt over behind Milford. Well, I went to Milford Church for a while, and, I was a member over about 10, 12 years. And while I was there, I got to see a document that was printed for that occasion. Samuel was at Milford Church. He was a circuit rider. And he was at the celebration when they were dedicating Milford Baptist Church to their churchhood. And they put a medal that one of the Mac Edwards found at up here at Edwards Lake, is where they had the Indians had killed those white settlers up there. And that's where Daniel Morgan and them went up through Lake Robinson. They went through Lake Robinson and went up to there, and they accosted those Indians and killed them. Well, George Washington had given Daniel Morgan a medal for the Battle of Cowpens. And later on, one of the Edwards family found the medal on the ground up at Edwards Lake where they had fought the Indians. And they researched the medal, and the medal was a medal that was given by George Washington to Daniel Morgan for the Battle of Cowpens. And the thing is, the medal itself was sent to Washington, and they looked at it. And as far as I know, Tony Edwards has still got that medal. And it was appraised at about $250,000. And one of the family had found that medal on the ground up at Edwards Lake. So that's how that came about.
Thank you, Vance. Anybody else? Yes.
Samuel Gibson's original destination was New York Harbor.
Yeah.
They couldn't get off the boat because there were 6 children, so they regressed them and they went across.
That's right. Neil's a descendant. We've got Henry Gibson is buried in our church cemetery. If you go out there, I guess he was a son of Samuel Gibson. You go out there and see his grave. It says he was born in England, and he's buried in the cemetery. The Gibsons married with the Tapps, I think, with the Tapps, and with who else? The Mostellers, okay. And so there are a lot of descendants in our church of Samuel Gibson.
Your daughter married a Fowler.
Oh, I got you. Good.
Okay.
All right, one more question. Yes.
Going back to Dean Crane. I knew Dean and Buford both back in the 40s. I was pretty small, but both of them was around. And Dean's daughter taught me at Mountain View High School in 1949. So I knew her pretty good.
That's good.
Thank you. All right, I think that's the last one. Is there anyone else? I think that was the last one I saw. Thank you again for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this. Just a little bit of taste of history of Washington Baptist Church with some humor. But I hope you'll be here next Sunday as we celebrate our day. Although we're going to be celebrating until December 31st. But this coming Sunday is our big day of celebration. So I hope you'll be here, make plans to be here and be a part of this great celebration. Drew?
Okay. Wanda, thank you so much. Dean, thank you. Thank you so much.
pleasure.
We appreciate you. Come and tell Dean how much you enjoyed his presentation tonight. And thank you for coming. This is a wonderful group, and we appreciate you very much and your interest in our church and in the history of our church. Let's stand and be dismissed. Father, thank you again for this evening, and thank you for the stories that have been shared, the history of our church and of this region that's been related. So much that we've learned tonight. And again, we thank you, Lord, for the glorious past of our church and of the churches in this region. But again, we look forward to what you have prepared for us in the days ahead, because we believe that our best years lie just ahead. We love you, Lord, and thank you that you are the God of all ages. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.